Okay, now let's create some control points for the spine, the back, the hips, the head, and we're also going to create the control objects because this really isn't going to take too long. So if I come over here and I create a control point just like I have before, so I'm going to call this PTCTRL underscore spine 01. Okay, and so this one, chest 001. This one we're going to go neck 001. This one we'll call head 001. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and align it fully to the spine. This one let's align fully to the chest. This one let's align fully to the neck. And this one let's align it to the head. Now, whenever I bend this one, I want the rest to follow. And so what I need to do is I need to link these points. Now, after you link these points, you want to make sure that you don't link them to anything else, because that will break this chain. So now if I grab this point right here, and if I bend forward, you'll notice the points move along with it. The same here. Now if you want the spine to actually move along with the points, then all we have to do is our orientation constraints. So I'm going to come up here to animation. I think that I might have not returned it exactly to its origin spot there. Yeah, because if you've done your alignments correctly, it shouldn't be shifting like that. Yeah, there we go. So that one didn't shift. And let's just make sure that this one is aligned correctly to that bone. That one looks like it's correct. And the head looks like it's also correct. So if you did this correctly, you should be able to move, shouldn't be able to move the bones at all, but if you move the point, let's go ahead and move it along local. Should be able to move the head bone. That should move as such. Yep. Looks good. Now the one last thing that we actually need to create here is we still need to create a point controller for the hip bone. We're going to make this a little bit smaller. And so I'm going to first of all alt align it to the hip. And if we come in here, we can adjust the size right here. And I'm going to make this the same color as the hip, that way it's easier to identify. Okay, now that hip bone should have an orientation constraint to that control point. Okay, so the control points are complete. However, we do need to make some custom control objects for the rest of the alien here. Let's, yeah, looks like we've got everything named except for this one. We do need to change that to, let's see, PT CTRL underscore hip 01. I'm going to go to the front viewport and I'm going to go into the splines and we are going to create some arrows that are going to be our hip controller. Now, a quick tip for making straight lines is if you hold down Shift, you can actually make a pretty straight line with that, which is kind of handy. So I'm just going to come up here, I'm going to click right there, go down here into the middle. So you can even make it 45 degrees if you wanted to. And we can adjust this to make it a little bit more precise if we want to. Let's close the spline. I'm going to turn that into an editable spline. That way I can actually move things around a little bit here. There. I think that looks decent. Okay, and we're going to create that, and I'll make that the same color as the hips. But we are going to also have one that's going to be over here on the other side. And I want this to actually be the same object. So before I change the color, move this out of the way so that I can see this. I'm just going to make a quick copy. And then we'll go with kind of a deep teal color for these. Actually, I can just go to attach that one. So now this is the same object. And if you were going to come over here and say if you wanted to turn it, well, first of all, I'd probably have to make sure that's deselected. Let's see, where's the gizmo for this? Now, it looks like the gizmo is centered there, but you can actually fix that very easily by coming over here. And if you go into the pivot point, go to Effect Pivot Only, we're going to center to the object, so now it's right there in the middle. And actually, I think that I would like to align that pivot point with the hip controller. So I can select Effect Pivot Only again. Now I'm going to actually add an orientation constraint to this pivot point. I'm going to constrain it to this controller. The reason why I'm not using link is because, if you recall, I mentioned earlier that if you link something, then it breaks other links that you've created. But now this actually allows me to use these, the hip controller in order to control the hips, which is pretty handy. So now let's take a look at the left viewport. And let's create something that's going to be able to control the spine. For this one, I'm going to go back into lines again. Actually, I'm going to create a triangle of sorts. So I'm going to hold down Shift, make a nice little 60-degree angle, straight down, and second. Let's go ahead and close that spline. And I'm going to go ahead and rename these. Okay, so this first line, we're going to call that the CC underscore hip 101. And I'm going to copy that. This one we're going to call CC spine. I want one also for the, so I got one for the spine, for the chest, and also for the neck. So I'm going to make 2 copies of this. Okay, this one I'm going to call chest. This one I'm going to call neck. Okay, so I'm going to actually put these, kind of try to line them up with the things that they're going to control the best that I can. Let's see here, that is the spine controller. So I'll line that up there. It really is more of kind of a visual thing at this point. There's the chest controller. And right here is the neck controller. So I go into Effect Pivot Only again. This time I'm going to do an Alt-Align with that pivot point to the neck control point. We do the same thing for the chest. The same thing for the spine. Make sure you're selecting the spine and not the hip. And then we're going to do the orientation constraint to these as well. I'm going to change the color of these also to match what they are controlling a bit more. Just to help keep it straight. Okay, so turn Effect Pivot Only off. Now let's go in and do our orientation constraints. Okay, if you did this correctly, if I grab that and I rotate around, you'll see it's turning the torso. Actually, I almost forgot something. These guys are going to work better if we actually link them, kind of like how we linked the control points. So I'm going to take this controller right here, I'm going to link it to that one, I'm going to take this one and link it to that one. And I'm going to take this one and I'm going to link it to the hip. So now if I come over here and I rotate this, rotates the whole body. I turn that one, everything else rotates along with it. So you can see I've got some really easy controllers in order to be able to move these objects. Now we have one more thing that we need to do here for the top, and this is actually going to be a center of gravity controller. To make the center of gravity controller, I'm actually going to make just a rectangle. And I'm just going to rotate it a little bit in the top viewport. Let's drag this up. And so creating this from this point on is pretty simple. All you have to do is select your root bone. We're going to select the hip bone. And we are actually going to link those to the center of gravity controller. Okay, so now if you grab the center of gravity controller, you should be able to move it around. And you'll notice that the whole body moves along with it. And if you rotate, it kind of goes crazy on you like that. All right, so the only controllers that we have left really for this section is that's going to be the head controller. Now for the head controller, we actually are going to use text, believe it or not. Huge text box. But we're just going to create parentheses. And there's no need for it to be as huge as it is. Okay, so actually giving it one space makes it about perfect. I'm going to change the color of the head controls to be yellow to kind of match the head. Actually, let's make the center of gravity, looks like I still need to rename it. Also teal. We'll call this CC underscore center of gravity 1. And this will be CC underscore head 1. And now this head point is actually going to have an orientation constraint to the head controller. Okay, so looks like that messed up, but you could probably guess why. So if you remember, the head and this controller actually need to have the same local orientation. And so what I need to do is go over here to Effect Pivot Only. I'm going to hit Alt-A. I'm going to align it to the head point so that way it is has the same exact local orientation. Turn Effect Pivot Only off. Now I'm going to go to that control point for the head, and now we'll try doing that orientation constraint again. Okay, and it works. So now I can just grab that thing, and you can turn that around, and the head is going to move along with it. If I grab the neck controller, the head is going to keep the same orientation as the head control object, which is actually exactly what we want. However, I think I'm going to do us a favor here, and let's go ahead and link this control object. Oops. Let's go ahead and link that to the neck. That way, if we do move the neck, it's Yeah, the head's going to kind of move along with it, but we still can manually change the head turn if we need to. Okay, so that should be all of the control objects that you need for the torso and the head and really the body in general. So next up is working on the shoulders and the arms and the hands.